Hi, everyone. It looks like they've closed the door, which means that's our cue to start. I'm E.J. Russell. I'll be moderating the panel today. I write mostly gay romance, and I will not be doing any more introductions for myself. However, I will introduce our lovely panelists. Deb Bentham. Once upon a time, Deb Bentham lived in Seattle. More recently, she landed in the upper Midwest, where she survives the winter cold by writing gay love stories. Personally, she has a checkered romantic history with men and women, but has finally found her own happy ever after. CJane Elliott. After years of hearing characters chattering away in her head, CJane Elliott finally decided to put them on paper and hasn't looked back since. A psychotherapist by training, CJane enjoys writing sexy, passionate stories that also explore the human psyche. Her books include the award-winning Serpentine series of novels, Serpentine Walls, Aiden's Journey, and Sex, Love, and Video Games, and the Wild and Precious series of bisexual romance novellas, Wild and Precious, There You Are, and Sandman's Family. Charley Descoteaux misspent a large chunk of her youth on the back of a Harley, meeting people and having adventures that sometimes pop up in her fiction. She has survived earthquakes, tornadoes, and floods, but couldn't make it a day through one day without stories. Her books include the bisexual romances Not the Doctor, Buchanan House, Torque, and Cascades. Amanda Jean is an editor and the host of the Hopeless Romantic, a podcast all about queer romance, which is great, by the way. You should listen. We're not wrangling manuscripts. You can find her watching documentaries, writing about the video game industry, and reading too many books on true crime and caring too much about fictional characters. Morticia Knight spends most of her nights writing about men loving men forever after. She's been fortunate enough to have several books on bestseller lists, along with 2 titles receiving recognitions from the Rainbow Book Awards. Once upon a time, she was the lead singer and songwriter in an indie rock band that toured the West Coast and charted on U.S. college radio. Morticia currently resides on the beautiful northern Oregon coast. Of her many books, 4 have main characters who are bisexual: Set Ablaze, Uniform Encounters 1, Strip Search, Sin City Uniform 7, Rockin' the Alternative, and Rockin' It Forever. Wave, everyone. So we have a few questions that we're going to address to the panelists, but feel free to raise your hand and ask questions too, and we'll hopefully have some time at the end for more. So we're going to start out with asking, what motivates you to include bisexual characters in your stories? Or in the case of Amanda, what elements of a story with bi characters would prompt you to acquire it?
I guess I can start out because I'm the odd duck out as an editor. I think the quickest answer to that is characters who are bi on screen, and are not villainized for it. And what I mean by on screen is that it isn't just one of those situations where the character says, well, I'm not into labels, which is fine in real life. There are tons of people who are not into labels, but when we have such a dearth of bi representation, I want to see it on the page. And also who have relationships or references to relationships with characters of multiple genders. So it's not just something that is shunted to the side, it's on the page.
Well, my first instinct when I started writing LGBTQ fiction was romance fiction, I should say, was to write bi characters because it's what I relate to. And I found it interesting, the feedback that I got, because the very first one I did was an MM, but one of the main characters is bisexual. And there was a discussion on page between the bisexual character and the gay character. And I got a little bit of pushback on that. I mean, they took it and it was fine, but it was a little bit of, is it really necessary to have that conversation about his bisexuality? And I said, well, I feel it is because I was writing it from my perspective. And so I would have had that conversation, and I have had that conversation when I'm in an opposite sex relationship, because there's a natural curiosity, and there's also me wanting it to not just be fetishized and just put off to the side, or have it just be invisible. It's like, oh, well, you know, you're a chick, I'm a guy, we're hot for each other, and we just don't need to really talk about that other part. So
Well, I spent a long time, I'm kind of old, I spent a lot of years looking for books that were about characters like me, that I could identify with, that I could look on the page and say, I had this experience, or I had this conversation, or I came across this prejudice, or whatever it was. So I always wrote bisexual characters. The first story I wrote with a bi character was in 1995. And that story kept bouncing back and bouncing back and bouncing back until I took out a couple of words and it looked like the character was straight, and bam, picked right up. So all of my stories they have a little bit of me in them, so there's probably always something in there that's a little bit queer, even if it's not overt. Like in my book Buchanan House, the first time the main character came out, he was a little kid, he was in my 4th grade, and he talked to his girlfriend at the time and asked her very innocently, do you like girls too? Because he liked boys too. And that's something that actually happened to me. So I like to put that kind of stuff in there. We didn't stay friends, but he didn't out me to everyone, so that was pretty cool. So I like to put that real stuff in there so that people like me who are looking for these stories can find themselves.
Very good. Let's see. I would say, first off, I have to out myself as I'm cis, het, non-bi, straight. Anyway, sorry, no. So when I was beginning to write I was enjoying this and I was writing it. I have to say that I wasn't really even noticing or focusing on what the characters were as far as bi or not. Most of them were gay men. That was it. But I then included a character in one of my stories that was definitely bisexual, and that was the whole, stated from the start. And then I actually looked back. So I guess what I'm saying is my consciousness around this whole issue just kept getting more and more. I was kind of your standard making bi people invisible because I didn't notice it, or I wasn't thinking about it, or it wasn't on my radar really. And I have been guilty of the thing of, if a guy, had been with women and then he goes with a guy, he is gay. He is just gay. And I really believed that with all my heart, like that there wasn't another alternative there. And I remember this when I was in my 20s and I, had dated a guy, and then he started going out with a guy. And so I was like, oh my God, he's gay. And then later he married a woman and had kids. And I was like, so for me, it's been about educating myself that, I see, there's like a lot of other, that's not binary, and there's a lot of other expressions. And I would say that now, definitely, I am consciously putting that into my books, like about bisexuality. In fact, I went back, I'm on the proofing stage of this one story for Dream Spinner, and I had the one character who's a side character saying, because the dreamy boss shows up on the LGBT cruise, but he had been dating a woman. And the cousin of the other guy goes, I knew that guy was gay. And that was all that it said. And when I was reading it just recently, I said, oh, wait. So I had the other guy say, or bi. It's just as simple as that, and yet it doesn't, I'm starting to see how much it doesn't show up, and people don't say it. So that's all. Not forever, but I won't.
I tend to write a little bit older characters, and older people have complex lives and histories, and it's also, so as somebody who writes romance and the characters are older, there's a question of, why are they single at a later time? And so I have to always come up with like good reasons why somebody who's like a wonderful person you want to be involved with is single. And so I sometimes end up with children in the stories because children will wreck a relationship. And right?
Yeah.
So so having, and then if you've got biological children, then there's a likelihood that that there was a relationship there that was opposite in some ways. But I actually also have to confess that that when I got one of the reasons to write by characters is because you get put on a panel. And I have had characters who were not explicitly bi in my stories before, but I was like, I am not going on the panel just because I'm bi. That seems kind of like, as a writer, a little... So, because I'm not the story. So I actually did get to quickly write a story that came out this last week that has a bi character. And he's just as awkward as I am, so it's good.
What is your least favorite myth surrounding bisexual characters in romance fiction? And how do you hope to dispel it in your own writing? And by the way, if you haven't already and you feel comfortable about telling everyone what your own orientation is, that would be a time that you can do it. By the way, I am personally gray asexual. Heteroromantic.
We're not all sluts. Okay, they're not all sluts. I can't really say, but yeah. So,
Okay. So,
no, it's okay. Checkered past. I said that, checkered. Yeah, but it's not. The fact that you're bisexual or a character is bisexual does not mean they're naturally dissatisfied in whatever relationship they're in, because whatever romantic inclination one has, there are a lot of people you could be involved with that you're not involved with, and yet people seem to be able to remain monogamous at a 10% ratio. So it's just as likely, I think, with bisexuals.
That's a great jumping off point. And by the way, I am bi and demi-romantic. I came across this editing bi literature, and there's a conflation, the panel and I discussed this last night, there's a conflation between bi and promiscuous, bi and polyamorous, bi and into menage. And while I say that shouldn't be an automatic correlation, I do not want to dismiss the people who are bi and are poly and are proud of being promiscuous, and they should be. I don't want to, because so often what happens is we're so eager to correct the things that are done wrong that we erase members of our own community. And that is the last thing I want to do to my fellow bi.
Well, there is one word that is often used to describe both male and female bisexuals, and that is the term experimenting. Mm-hmm. And I find that incredibly offensive. And I have yet, I think, to truly write a story that addresses that specifically. I do in my Rockin' the Alternative and Rockin' It Forever. It starts out, it's a short story, and so it gives the impression that it's a gay for you, but it's not. It's just a stepping off point for Brian to discover his sexuality and finally be open with himself and finally deal with all the things, and then discovers that his family thought he was gay all along, and he was the last to get the memo. But I got some pushback from that because reviewers were saying he was experimenting, that he wasn't truly bisexual. because gosh, he's 28 years old and he's just now discovering, magically that he's bisexual. Well, my daughter didn't come out as bisexual until last year, and she's 26. So I think, and I've known people who haven't come out as gay, they haven't come out as trans, they haven't come out as bisexual until much later in life. Why? Because people say dumb shit like, oh, they're just experimenting. So I think I'd like to write more from that perspective, and I'd like to address that more.
So my least favorite thing I see on the page is that a character's orientation is defined by their pairing, defined by their partner instead of by themselves. I've seen a lot of books, and have written a few, where the character is very clearly stating that they are bi. They have had previous relationships, either on or off page, with members of more than one gender, and then the pushback is, oh, this guy reads as gay. So, especially if they're in the same sex relationship at the end, which I published with Dream Spinner Press, so a lot of them are. And so what I did very consciously with that was last Christmas I wrote a story called Cascades. It takes place in the Pacific Northwest and in Canada. And both of the gentlemen involved are very clearly bi. And they talk about it, and they end up getting engaged, but there's no indication that they're changing their minds, that they're finally making a decision. And they're older. They're both pushing 50 like I am. Well, they're younger than me. I hope the perception is that at that age, when they say they're bi, they know what they're talking about.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think mostly it's all been said, except for I do want to point to the gay for you thing, that I think that's my least favorite is where there's a character and it's an MM and they've been married or they've been with women, and then all of a sudden now they're fall in love and they're with this guy now and it's all wonderful, and yet the word bisexual is never anywhere in the manuscript. I mean, it's not even on the page. And now that's not necessarily bad or wrong, but I think that it leads to this whole thing that's been called gay for you, where it's like, well, this person isn't really, I don't know what they are. I guess they're gay for them. I don't know what that means even, except for it's something that's called a trope. And my new, yay, bisexuals exist thing, I really am very so conscious now of, wait, let's look at what really we could call this person in a way that would be validating and that would actually acknowledge that, there are people who have love and affection and attraction to both or any gender. So
I didn't want to interrupt, but I wanted to say, as a call to action, gay for you, which I know has been sort of divisive within the community itself, I think the core here is people being attracted to stories about revelations and identity affirmation, and I think we just need to reframe it as the bisexual revelation rather than gay for you. And I think it's also the focus of a one true pairing of really traditional fairy tale monogamy. Those are all still accessible and just as emotionally satisfying when they're bisexual revelations rather than gay for you. So if we can just reframe the language and actually put that in the discussion, I think the contention over the gay for you trope will go away on its own.
good.
Bisexual revelation, hashtag.
How do you think that romance fiction can help raise awareness of a bisexual individual's personal journey and the prejudices they might face in society?
Well, I'll just be really brief, bringing up the Rockin' books again, and him finally, his family thinking he was gay all along. And so when he finally is talking to his mother, and she says, oh, well, we've always known you were gay. And he said that he says, well, no, I'm bisexual. And then he thinks to himself, by looking at her expression, that it was almost as if she was disappointed to find out that he was bisexual as opposed to being gay. Like, that's been such a thing of, like, oh, they come out as gay or they've come out as lesbian, and they're, oh, I'm bisexual. Oh, all right, So again, it goes back to that being invisible thing, where you can be one or the other, but you can't be both.
Sorry to grab the mic again. I'm sorry. I'm chatty today. My thing, I don't want to look at writing as an activist space, but I think it is a Venn diagram. And one of the things that I think helps for representation is destigmatizing what bi is, and not using narrow parameters of it means you are attracted to your same sex and opposite sex, because there are more than two genders. And what does it mean when you're in a relationship with someone who is gender fluid, gender queer, non-binary? Why? And it also, sorry to anyone who is pan, that does not automatically qualify you as pansexual, because it just means two, or at least two, to be bi. You can be attracted to men and people who identify as non-binary. You can be attracted to cis women and non-binary folks. You can be attracted to cis men and cis women. It's not just these two things and nothing else. And I think if we put that on the page, if we publish books with non-binary and cis, or non-binary and non-binary pairings, and market them as bi, it might help to clarify that this orientation is not as black and white as maybe people think it is.
That's great. Ditto. Just underscore everything that she just said. It's tricky in romance because we expect at the end that someone is going to be committed to someone else or someone's else. And so it does get kind of tricky. We bisexuals have issues that monosexuals don't have. Like if you're primarily in a masculine community and you're monosexual, a gay man, for instance, then you have less jealousy issues, less prejudice coming from all sides of you, or the same if you're identifying as female. So it's really hard for me to express, but the nuances are there, and we can see them. I mean, I can see if they're there, and I can see if they're not there, and I try and leave them on the page. I don't know. I'm getting off topic. Go ahead.
No, that was great.
Well, I think you do. And you should read her book. She does deal with all those things a lot. Way more than a lot of romance, LGBTQ romance. But the way I have done is just having the conversations on the page between characters where the one, if the one is bi and the other one brings up some of these things that bisexuals face. So they're loving each other, they're young guys, they're like, but the one is gay and the one is bi, and the gay one's like, oh God, you're just going to go get married because the hetero thing, and it's going to be, I know that's what's going to win out, and things like that. So it was, for me, the way to do it was just to have it be in a discussion and see how my characters work it out, see how that, so that's pretty much it.
I think fiction can change the world, and I think we've actually seen that. I think because I think it's about visibility. I think one of the reasons we have marriage equity at this point is because people came out, and so people knew they knew someone or someones who were gay or lesbian, and I think that's also a thing for bisexuals to come out, because that. But the other thing, I really think part of why we have marriage equity is Will and Grace came into people's living rooms, and they got really comfortable with Will because he wasn't having sex, so that helped. But they got comfortable with, there's a gay man who visits my living room once a week, or in reruns every day, and I think that really kind of lowered the freak out bar. And I think in some ways that's what we do with fiction is we put people out. And if you write a character that's rich enough, then people feel like they know that character, and then they feel like even if they've never actually physically met a gay or lesbian or bi character, they know someone. They know this bi character that they spent, a week reading. And then that becomes like, well, I should, there should be gay and lesbian and bi rights for this character. And so, I think that's kind of the way to do revolution all over the place. But then that's because I don't get out much.
A couple of you have mentioned pushback. What kinds of pushback have you gotten when you've challenged people's expectations about what bi characters might be, either from readers or other writers or just the public at large?
Well, I've talked about my characters. I'll just talk about real life for a second, although I put real life in my characters. There's the common misconception that if you're bisexual and you're in an opposite sex pairing, that for sure, without a doubt, you are going to leave that person one day for the other sex. And then it can be the other way. You're in the same sex, like, you were just talking about, gonna leave, and that's what made me think of it. And I can go on record and say that I've had long-term relationships with both sexes, and neither one of us, and with other, with bisexual men and bisexual women, and neither one of us in that relationship left the other one for somebody of a different sex. So, I'm not saying that doesn't happen because you meet people and you fall in love, or you fall out of love and you meet someone else. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but that whole idea of they're going to cheat, for sure. They're going to go for the other sex, for sure. And I think that, I addressed that just as a conversation topic in my first book with a bi character, but I think that would be something to really explore some more. Yeah.
Well, it's not just that they're going to cheat, it's that a person can't live, if they're bi, without both sexes.
Right, or doing the poly thing. Right.
They can't
Yeah.
live
Yeah.
in a stable relationship until their death, because they need
both.
Yeah. That means.
And at the same time.
Although,
and there's not that there's anything wrong with that, but the idea that that's the only way that it can ever happen, you're always going to have both, is just that's offensive too. Yeah.
Hello again.
Hello.
So this is a mix of personal and professional. In my personal life, I whenever I came out as bi to friends, colleagues, strangers on the street, the comments I got from monosexuals were typically, "Oh, so did you primarily date women or did you primarily date men? Right. So you must have primarily dated X gender." And that's not actually, even if it is true, who cares? And that was one of the things that I've pushed back against as an editor, is the idea that one is dominant, and it can be dominant because it is not a 50-50 split. It is, and it can change over time. You may find yourself more attracted to one gender at a certain point and then less attracted to it later, just because people are people and they change, and there's no accounting acting for taste. So I think that has been something that I've challenged as a person in my everyday life who's bi, and also as an editor who has edited stories for monosexual people wherein it's kind of a black and white 50-50 split, where this is what being bisexual means, and it either means that you're attracted to cis women and cis men and nothing else. So the pushback I received was essentially, well, like, this is how my characters think. And that's not helpful. You can change how your characters think. You're the author. They are not autonomous beings. Right? It's like, this isn't the end of the line. So essentially, I'm sure there's been lots of pushback from readers, and I'm actually interested in hearing about that from our author panelists. But from authors themselves who are monosexual, a lot of the pushback has been like, well, this is just how they are. And it's like, you can change that. You can add anything you would like.
So I have two main areas of pushback that I want to talk about. The first one, I just went through edits on a story with a bisexual main character. And I had an editor tell me he's not bi. Because he doesn't express on page any attraction or anything to anyone of the opposite gender, because he's going after this guy he just met because he thinks he's hot, and he doesn't even look at another woman at a woman during the whole story, so therefore he can't be bi. Forget that he had a long-term girlfriend before he moved from Boise to Portland, but he can't be bi, he has to be gay. Basically, I just told her no. And another, I had another book that came out earlier this year, and it's about a man who's in his older 20s, and he's running away from his past life, and he's also, since he's on his own for the first time, he doesn't have to worry about expressing parts of himself that he had to keep hidden because of his former lifestyle. So he really wants to go and figure out how to find a man to see if he, to have sex with him. to see if he's really attracted to men, or if it's all in his head, or just explore these things he's been thinking about his whole life. Mm-hmm. And so after he gets a job and meets some people, he sees a woman, and he sees a couple of women, and he's kind of preoccupied with their breasts. He likes their breasts, their pretty breasts. And so I got a lot of pushback saying that since he is obsessed with boobs, he reads as gay. He reads as a gay man with a boob fetish. What? I didn't say it. I mean, I didn't write it. So
It's on Goodreads. Go read it.
It's confusing to me, because to me this guy is very clearly bi. He's attracted, turns out, to many genders, not just females with nice breasts, not just a guy who's really hot. So it's kind of confusing to me, but that's the pushback I get, is that if my characters don't have relations on page with at least two genders, then they read as gay. And that's really problematic, because romance readers want fidelity. They insist upon fidelity. And I don't want to disappoint my readers by introducing extraneous characters for no reason except to show sexuality. I can do that sometimes, and I have, and I'm sure I will again. But if it doesn't fit the story, I don't want to do that. So that's my convoluted pushback.
That's a good one. I'm just trying to think. Well, I've had the pushback about, when I had a character who was only with women all the way up till his mid-20s, and then... God forbid. I know. And then he decides, well, I really want to see, it's not really working for me. I'm going to go find out about the other, same sex. And people were like, that's not possible. This person couldn't have gotten to age 24 without knowing who he was and knowing, that kind of thing. Like everyone's supposed to know by the time they're, and many people do, I guess, know something by the time they're 13 or whatever it is. But so that was definitely a pushback I got. I was trying to think if there was one other one, but anyway, that's one I remember. So, we get pushback for lots of things as writers, as you all know who are writers. I mean, half the people will love one thing about your work and say this is the best thing about it, and the other half, that's the thing they hate the most and whatever. And I think it ties back to the question before, which is having our writing make a difference and bring some awareness to, to these issues. And when you see some of the pushback you get, I think we can take it as motivation to keep writing by characters. And I want to say also trans, because that word hasn't really been spoken yet in this room, but, it's not just gay and lesbian, it's gay, lesbian, trans, and all the other permutations. But I think we're always going to get pushback. It's kind of fun to hear about the pushback stuff.
So my explicitly bi story came out on Monday, and I've been traveling, and I haven't really read anything. So yeah, no pushback yet.
I'm going to keep an eye on that Goodreads.
Yeah, go to Goodreads.
I do not keep an eye on Goodreads. That's not good for your health. But I personally, I live in a very small town, and so whenever I come out as bi, the response from the other people is either that they do or don't want to sleep with me. Which I think goes back to that, fuck a snake if they'd hold the head still perception of bisexuality. But I don't know. Yeah, that's my pushback.
And they go right to sex.
So you guys said universally romance readers expect fidelity.
Yes.
That's that's the trope, right? That's what needs to happen, right? So the thing I think
By the end,
is community, like they expect, like, okay, so the man's down with the man, the man's down with the woman, whatever it's cis or whatever. And so the bi stories, particularly the bi erasure, I think that's where it comes in. They can't have the extraneous relationship at any point during the thing. You could mention it, like I'm bi 17 years ago.
Right.
And it was great. I liked it, but I like dicks now. So, it's like, that's okay. But, if there's the breakup or whatever, and then that man then goes and dates a woman and they come back to that, like that becomes a problem. So how, as a community, how do you solve that and help the audience come to the realization that it's about the journey and not necessarily like the bits?
I did it by breaking the fidelity rule.
Yeah,
Yeah, me too.
And truthfully, and that's very, very true, because you can't really get them to that place. You just have to, like with any other, I guess I'm using the word concept because to a lot of readers who don't have an experience on the LGBTQ spectrum, to them sometimes it can be a concept. It's not a reality. And so it's very difficult to lead people to a reality. And I think really, especially in the romance genre, because there are all these rules. And I mean, I've had pushback, going back to that too, about, well, my characters need to be emotionally pure. I understand this one's 32 and this one's 40, but they can't have ever been in love before. before. Because, that's just not pure enough. I can't believe that they're really, really deeply in love with this person if they've been in love before. So they can't possibly have an HEA now. And so you add bisexuality, or if you added trans, or if you added anything else into it, that's taking them even further from their own personal reality and what they can relate to. And so at this point, write some damn cheating in it,
Exactly.
just write it how it is,
I think
how it
cheating is hot. Sorry.
It's one of my kinks.
I think cheating is hot, but it's also a review killer. I mean, it really is. Romance readers do not like cheating, but that doesn't mean. Romance readers can like having the last person that person was involved with still involved in their lives. I mean, to have to be
Sometimes.
friends with your ex,
Yeah.
as long as there's not some sense that they're gonna sleep with that person, but to be friends with your ex, so you can have that. That can all be part.
And to clarify what I said, I have in my book Torque, I have the main character Mick. He lets a woman pick him up, but he thinks that his love interest is already in a relationship. Turns out he kind of is. So it's not actually cheating.
But even not actually cheating, because I've had not actually cheating, I've had fuck buddy things going on, and it's like, well, if he's even met the person, has even locked eyes with him one time, if he goes with somebody else, that's cheating. That's totally cheating. It's
We had a couple
Yeah.
questions. So
she's had her hand raised for a really long time.
So I work at something we've talked about is backlash, not just from readers, but from editors that you submit books with my characters to. And I work at 9-Star, and I know, at least from my experience, we try to cultivate an editorial culture that is supportive towards bi characters. And I guess my question for the panel is, what presses would you recommend sending your books with bi characters to?
Ooh, I got this one. I don't have the full slate of it, but I am an editor and I work for many presses. First of all, the disclaimer is read their submission guidelines and read them thoroughly, and then examine their catalog. Look at their tags, because if they say they accept bi romance, trans romance, ace stories, and they have one book in those categories, you maybe don't want to go with them. But off the top of my head, Riptide, Less Than 3 Press, 9-Star, Evernight, I'm forgetting people. Dreamspooner I don't know as well, because they are ultimately an MM Press, so I'm not sure how they handle on-page bisexuality, but they are kind of the giants. And then if anyone has any other recommendations for publishers?
Those were the good ones.
No, yeah.
There's more, and there's little presses, and you can obviously self-publish as well, but it is out there. Just go to the press's website, look at their submission guidelines, see what their language is like, and then additionally look at their catalog, because a lot of people will say they take something and it turns out they do not.
Yeah, really look at the catalog. I'm not going to name names, but
Why not? No.
had a professional relationship with a company that's been expressing themselves as LGBTQ, and I looked at the catalog. I was like, oh, really? They got new, and they're trying. Props for trying, but I was especially horrified by the few trans titles they had on there. I read the blurb and I went, oh my God, no. So, looking at the catalog, I think that's huge.
Really quickly, I have an addendum because I realized I was exclusionary. A lot of the women-centric, the lesbian-centric presses are heavily lesbian-centric, and I had to actually ask a couple if they accept bi work, so that's kind of an extra step you might need to take. It's worth doing because we need bi rep in every single letter of the acronym.
Okay, first of all, you said something about, 22 and you don't know. I'm in my early 60s. Didn't know that I loved gay romance until my late 50s. So, you discover things like life. So, as for gay for you, I think it's love for you, not gay for you. So that's another thing. But the big thing is, And it's very hard for me to find books that are 2 bi guys, 1 gal, and they're in a monogamous relationship between the 3 of them. There is no cheating. I think of Nicole Edwards, and she's done several books, and she's just done another one. And it's very hard to find. And they define bi guys. She defined bi guys wonderfully, because those 2 guys in A Million Tiny Pieces loved each other, but they loved her both, and they made a tripod work wonderfully. And that's really hard to find, because then I feel like it's a true bi. They can be together, the 2 guys. They can be together, the 1 guy and the 1 girl. They can be together, all 3 of them. And it was when I finally started understanding it more and feeling, I don't know how, I'm not expressing it well, but it was like, this really made me feel like, they get to experience and be their real selves.
Look for, if you're looking for that kind of triad relationship, look for books tagged MFM and MMF. MFM is a little trickier because it's a lot of no homo, don't touch.
Right. And MMF,
With the F in the middle.
a lot of times is one of the guys won't touch
Yeah,
either. So
it's tricky. You have to really be careful of the blurb and just read the copy thoroughly. But it does exist. It's really hard to find. A lot of it is erotic oriented, which is fine, but sometimes that's not what you're looking for.
Is there a question back here?
So, one of the things I was, it seems like there's a lot of this focus and on the one true pairing and the one couple with monogamy, and it seems like there's still especially as far as bisexual representation, not every bi person is polyamorous, and that's a stereotype, but there's also a significant number of bi people in the poly community, and that representation, it seems like there's a huge lack. And so I was wondering if you could speak to that kind of aspect, especially around publishing and poly, that kind of overlap between poly and bi, and how much there's a lack, but also is there places where this is starting to happen and where the shift happens? Because this is kind of the reason why I'm probably never going to be anything but self-published, because I just cross too many boundaries in my work. I have a lot of poly characters, a lot of bi characters, I have a big cast that are diverse, and have characters with trans and disability, and I feel like I'm never ever going to be anything other than self-published, because there's just, it's all boxes, and that's part of why bi is so it's so challenging in some ways. It's just because the publishing industry is so much boxes, and bi crosses over boxes.
Good way to say it.
So I guess speaking to, if you're crossing multiple boxes, how does that even work publishing-wise, or?
Charley, I don't mean to cut you off. I just think Charley has a good
I would
take on
suggest
that.
to find a house with acquiring editors. So you can talk to an editor and find one that's interested in promoting that. I was really lucky. Before CJane Press closed, I found an amazing acquiring editor.
What is an acquiring editor? I'm sorry.
The acquiring editor has power under the publishing house to contract a work, to say, I want this to be part of the catalog for this publisher. And they're your best champions. If you can find an acquiring editor that's interested in poly relationships, in romance or outer romance, then never let her go.
Just happens to be sitting next to me. Yeah. Happy ending.
Because because
I'm wondering in general, is there any changes happening with pushing boundaries and
I think so. I think that a lot of publishers are reacting to readers wanting more different things to read. I've seen that a lot because even just a few years ago, I had trouble finding things that I could get excited about reading. And I would write those stories and I would send them out, and it's like crickets. But that's changing. Even though that one market is no longer available, we have 9-star, we have, less than 3, we have a whole bunch of other publishers that are hopefully going to rush in to fill the void, because there's a lot of great editors out there who will champion you. And before we're done, I just want to say, one thing I really wanted to say in this panel about what I want to see most in stories that include bi characters is characters who don't apologize for being bi. Characters who don't apologize to anyone. They don't apologize to their exes, not to their current partners, not to readers, not to anyone. And that's the same true for someone who's trans or genderqueer or fluid, anything. All these characters, they've had to apologize for it all this time, and I want that to stop.
All right. Yeah.
I think we're about out of time.
It's not a bad ending.
1 minute?
One question then, because that's exactly what I would like to hear personally, is just maybe going down this really quick, just what exactly would you love to see?
Well, I liked Charlie's answer quite a bit. I think just reiterating the same thing is, being able to put something out there that, the general public who is not coming from that experience can accept it. When, writing a character who's coming out at a later age, or, not, it would be nice if in the heterosexual community that they could not place their expectations on what they expect this particular identity to be about, that they could learn from it instead of judging it.
And mine will be just the same, but also don't feel beholden as if you have to educate the characters in your book, handhold the characters in your book, and handhold the audience. They're adults, they can deal with it.
Infidelity, checkered pasts, real people that are really have had relationships and messy stuff and all of that. I want to see more of, that in romance, that then, ta-da-da, it ends with an HEA, but hey, it's real life and all that, because I find that a lot more interesting.
Yeah, good solid characters will bring me to my knees anytime, no matter what. And I think that's a big part of it, is making characters that jump off the page and just grab people and make them change them. Because love transforms.
That's it. Perfect.